Prepare for a journey through courage, faith, and resilience. The story of Nat Turner, a man who defied an entire system in the name of freedom, will inspire you to believe in the power of a single soul to change the course of history. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to discover more about figures who defied the impossible. Let's embark on this journey of transformation together. Nat Turner was born on a small farm in Southampton County, Virginia, on October 2, 1800. From his first cry, destiny seemed to have already etched a mission in his chest. The elders in the community noticed that this baby was no ordinary one. His grandmother said he was born with the mark of the prophet, and that his eyes contained a light from another world. In an era when enslaved people were forbidden to learn how to read or write, Nat surprised everyone by demonstrating a sharp intelligence and a rare sensitivity. Even before understanding what freedom was, he was already speaking of it in dreams and whispers. From a very young age, he fell in love with reading, specifically the Bible. The accounts differ on who taught him to read, but it is believed that he was taught by his first enslaving family, who considered him useful due to his interpretive ability. Access to reading, though limited, was like opening a window in the midst of a dark cell. And there, among verses, sacred names, and prophetic visions, Nat found a greater meaning for the pain that surrounded him. He didn't just read the Bible, he absorbed it, deciphered it, felt it pulse in his chest. But even more impressive was what he saw with his eyes closed. Since childhood, Nat claimed to have visions. Dreams full of symbols like rivers of blood, angels wielding swords, and Christ himself speaking to him through thunder. At night, while others slept or silently cried, Nat would lie staring at the wooden ceiling of the cabin, interpreting the signs in the sky as divine messages. He firmly believed that God had chosen him to free his people, and this certainty was unshakable. Little by little, he began to earn a reputation among the other enslaved people. They called him the preacher or the seer. He spoke of redemption, salvation, and freedom with an eloquence that seemed to come from another plane. Even the most skeptical felt something different when they were around him. His impromptu sermons, even whispered among the fields, had the power to ignite weary hearts. By his mid-20s, Turner believed that his mission would still take time, but that each chapter of his life was spiritual preparation. He observed, learned, and waited for the signs. The brutality of slavery didn't harden him, it inflamed him. And in silence, he continued to read the sky. Slavery in Virginia was not just an economic institution. It was a ruthless machine that ground bodies, silenced souls, and tried to erase any trace of identity among the enslaved. Nat Turner grew up within this cruel mechanism, but he never accepted that condition as permanent. While many around him learned to adapt in order to survive, he walked in the opposite direction. His soul was restless, rebellious, filled with an invisible force that seemed to come from the very sky. On the plantation where he lived, he saw women being torn from their children, men whipped until their flesh was torn, young women raped with no consequences for the perpetrators. Slavery was an open wound that never healed. Each day was a sentence without judgment, a muffled cry stifled by fear of reprisal. The white people in the region saw the black people as property, less than human, less than thinking beings. But Nat saw something different in every downcast gaze, in every silent tear. He saw sparks waiting for fire. By the age of 25, he was already known across several farms for his spiritual gifts. Even in secret, enslaved people came from far and wide to hear him preach, to recount strange dreams, to ask for advice. He had become a kind of beacon in the darkness. And at the same time, he was feared by the whites. There was something in his posture, erect, firm, with a penetrating gaze, that disturbed the slave owners. They felt that he had not bowed on the inside, and that was dangerous. But Nat also carried internal dilemmas. He questioned his own methods. For years, he tried to settle for spiritual resistance. He believed that praying, fasting, and instructing was enough. However, as time passed and the violence only increased, something inside him began to break. The divine signs intensified. Thunder without rain, eclipses, spots on the sun, voices in dreams. He felt that the time for action was approaching, that faith needed to gain muscle, hands, and blood. The restless soul he had always carried now began to burn in an almost unbearable way. In moments of solitude, Nat cried. Not out of fear of death, but out of the pain of the people still in chains. He questioned God with the intimacy of a son who rebels against his father's silence. But even in tears, he never lost his faith. On the contrary, it was in faith that he found the strength to continue. He knew that his life no longer belonged to him. He was part of something much greater. And within him, something screamed, "The day is coming." It was in 1831 that the heavens finally spoke with the clarity that Nat Turner had been waiting for. It was February when a rare phenomenon covered the sun with a mysterious shadow, a solar eclipse that left Southampton County bathed in an unsettling twilight in the full light of day. For many it was just a natural event. For others it was an omen. But for Nat, it was the definitive sign. The moment had come. That morning he was working in the field, the hoe plunged into the dry earth, when he felt a deep vibration in his stomach, as if the very ground had called his name. The sky darkened in an unnatural way. There was no storm, no strong wind. Only silence, an absolute silence, as if the universe held its breath. The birds fell silent, the enslaved stopped working, and the slave owners looked up with suspicion. Nat, however, fell to his knees. He wept. He laughed. And he understood that God had answered. And salvation. He didn't promise an easy victory, but assured them that their souls would be redeemed. This is not a revolt for revenge, he said, but a sacred mission to free God's people. The plan was woven in silence, like a cloak of rags sewn through the night. Nat waited for other signs and they came. An unusual spot on the sun. A whisper heard in dreams. A child saying without knowing why, something big is about to happen. In Turner's mind, everything fell into place. The sky was moving, destiny was aligning. And he was the sword of heavenly justice. In August, a new celestial anomaly appeared, a bluish light in the night sky that seemed to dance like a spirit. For Nat, that was the final confirmation. He gathered his men and set the date, August 21st. It would be a Sunday, the Lord's Day. And on that Sunday, the blood of the oppressors would stain the earth in the name of liberation. The tension in the days leading up to the uprising was almost palpable. Nat barely slept. He fasted, prayed, and wrote on pages hidden under the straw bed. He recorded visions, instructions, and even dialogues he believed he had with God himself. His eyes burned with intensity. The preacher was now becoming a warrior. The boy who read the sky was now going to wield a blade. History was about to change. Although Nat Turner's revolt was brutally crushed and he paid with his life, his influence transcended the boundaries of time and space, shaping a narrative of resistance that continues to echo in future generations. His fight, although brief, is a symbol of courage, a reminder that even the most desperate situations can spark movements of transformation. Today, Nat Turner's story reflects many of the social justice movements that have gained strength in recent decades. The struggles against systemic racism, police brutality, and issues related to racial inequality in the United States can be seen as a reflection of the same forces that Nat faced in his time. Throughout the 20th century and into the 21st century, activists like Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, and more recently, movements such as Black Lives Matter, have drawn inspiration from figures like Nat Turner, who, despite facing an oppressive and violent system, did not remain silent in the face of injustice. Turner's resistance to slavery was not only a physical act, but also a spiritual and psychological awakening. Nat deeply believed that his fight was connected to a divine mission, a mission that aimed not just at physical freedom, but also the spiritual and emotional liberation of enslaved Black people. In a historical moment where subjugation was imposed for centuries, his faith and courage transcended the physical and touched something much deeper within the human soul, the inalienable right to live with dignity and freedom. Today, this notion of freedom, both physical and emotional, remains central to the fight for equality. Nat Turner's revolt is seen by many as one of the first manifestations of organized Black resistance, a milestone in understanding that the struggle for freedom must be waged not only against the oppressors but also against the fears and limitations imposed by oppression. Turner's legacy is also visible in the way Black communities continue to rebuild their identities, not just in terms of resistance to oppression, but also in terms of affirming their culture, history, and rights. The celebration of Black history and the fight for recognition of dignity, such as through movements like Black History Month and the growing presence of Black leaders in politics and culture, are a continuation of the struggle that began in 1831. While modern society has evolved in many ways, the confrontation of power structures that still perpetuate racism and inequality shows that Nat Turner's work was not in vain. True freedom, as he well understood, is not only the absence of physical slavery but also the transformation of the mental, spiritual, and social structures that imprison the soul. What Turner began as a fight for freedom and justice continues to be a cause lived by many. The fight against police brutality, the protests for justice for victims of racism, and the unrelenting pursuit of equal opportunities are ways in which the descendants of Nat Turner continue his mission, armed with the conviction that, despite the adversities, justice and truth will prevail. In the early hours of August 21, 1831, the insurrection Nat Turner had planned for so long finally unfolded. The sky, still cloaked in the mantle of night, seemed to anxiously await what was to come. The first blow was silent, like a whisper in a windless night. Nat and his group, composed of 6 other men, attacked the farm of Joseph Travis, his former master. The field was silent, the house still warm from the fire, but the sound of metal cutting flesh soon echoed through the night. Travis was the first to fall, killed with a swift blow. As the first blood was shed, a wave of courage swept through the others. Nat's men, many of whom had up until then been mere spectators of his vision, became warriors with the strength and spirit of a divine revolution. The order was clear: destroy the symbols of oppression, attack the plantations, and free the brothers and sisters who suffered under the lash. They moved quickly, like ghosts of the night, and with no mercy. However, the impact of the attack was not just physical, it was symbolic. Nat, in his visions, had always heard that his mission would be more than a mere armed revolt. He wanted the world to see the strength of the black spirit rising up against centuries of oppression. In his mind, this was the beginning of a cosmic revolution, an uprising that would not only free the enslaved but also challenge the very structure of slavery. As the insurrection gained momentum, the number of followers increased. Enslaved people from nearby farms, previously fearful to act, joined the movement. With each attack, more people joined, the faces once pale with fear now illuminated by the flame of hope. When Nat's group reached the farm of William Parker, the number of insurgents had already surpassed 100. They were more organized, more confident, like a tide of liberation advancing relentlessly.